Rising. We have another very exciting show for you today. Briahna is here. Hello.
Hello.
All right, let's get to it.
I'll start us off. Robby, well, the person responsible for leaking a trove of classified U.S. military documents is a gun enthusiast in his 20s who worked on a military base, according to reporting from the Washington Post. The Post spoke to members of a small online group of about 24 men and boys who say this person uploaded the documents to their Discord group chat. The individual responsible for the leak, named OG in the Post reporting, claimed he worked in a secure location on a military base and hand-transcribed the documents near verbatim to post online. When that became too tiresome, he started posting photos of the original documents instead. There are still more questions than answers when it comes to OG's motives. The small invite-only online group to which he leaked the papers began meeting in 2020 and were brought by their, quote, mutual love of guns, military gear, and God. And OG, the group's de facto leader, quote, claimed to know secrets that the government withheld from ordinary people.
Meanwhile, new revelations from the leaked documents shed light on how the blob actually feels about the state of the war in Ukraine. CNN reports the documents detail weaknesses in Ukraine's defense weaponry, predict a likely stalemate between Ukraine and Russia is to continue for months. In fact, officials don't expect any peace talks to take place this year, meaning we could see fighting extend well into 2024 at the very least. Now, the documents also detail a startling near miss in October of last year. Russian fighter pilot mistakenly thought he had permission to take a manned British spy jet and attempted to shoot down the plane and failed only when his weapon malfunctioned at the last minute, which is terrifying. You know, it's Cuban Missile Crisis type stuff all over again, something that could bring us, to the brink of global nuclear holocaust.
Both of these stories headline military malfeasance. What is going on here? Let's start with the first one, because I know that you read up on this one.
I did. So this is very interesting, and I think should probably put to rest the ideas that I know a bunch of people had on all sides of the spectrum, that this leak was done with an ideological purpose, either to make Ukraine seem in a bad position and thus sympathetic, so that we need to fund them even more and we need to really contribute to their defense. That was one theory. Another theory was maybe it was done by a pro-Russian person to show, look, Ukraine is losing, they're going to lose, time for some realism. Neither of those things seem to be the case. Mm-hmm. So the person who leaked it works on a military base, is in his 20s. So the Post actually was able to review some video footage of who they think it is at the gun range. He's like a gun enthusiast, kind of an anti-government perspective, militia-ish from what I'm understanding. And he was in this private Discord server with all these other dudes.
And for people who are blessedly not online and don't know what Discord is.
So Discord is, it's a social media platform. You can set up private. It's a chat room, basically. It's extremely popular with people, I would say, who play games, who play online games. And in fact, video games was part of their reason for meeting, to discuss first-person shooters, gun video games. The person the Post spoke to is a very young man, is underage, actually. Huh. So they were talking about video games and guns, and it seems like the leaker, he was like the leader of this group because he had all this interesting info to tell them about the government. Like, his motivation, really, it seems, was to impress his friends online. And so he would do transcripts, annotated transcripts of the intelligence. He'd been doing that for months and months and months. And then people were not engaging with it enough in the Discord server. So then he started just posting the actual photos to be like more impressive. And he sent a couple posts saying, like, you guys aren't commenting on, you're not responding to this. Like, I'm going to stop doing this unless you're really going to engage with what I'm showing you.
So it was a gamer posting to impress the boys in his chat room.
Yeah. So that's what it appears to be. Look, this is reporting from the Washington Post. It was pretty thorough. They interviewed someone in this chat room. They said they were able to view actual footage of the guy. This is all allegedly, reportedly, so on. It's possible they got this wrong, but it looks pretty solid to me, and actually fairly plausible, frankly, because what I said, remember I said, if the leaker has an ideological motivation, dumping this stuff in a Discord server where it languishes for a long time doesn't make any sense. So given that that's what he did, this does make a lot of sense.
Yeah, it really lined up on this one. The nonsensicality of it ended up panning out. Okay, so point Robby on that one. You sort of predicted that sort of an outcome. The second story, I mean, it has the vague whiff of the kind of U.S. drone Russian warplane incident that happened also earlier this year, last month, I think it was. This one is even more of a close call where because of some kind of miscommunication between the ground and the Russian plane, the pilot thought he had permission to take out this British plane and only didn't fire and potentially make contact because of a technical failure with its own weaponry. What happens in the alternative? Because we have seen people say over and over again, countries have to pay, there has to be some kind of retribution, there has to be some pushback, things, even if it's a mistake, there is definitely a political force that says mistakes even had to be met with a level of force that could escalate into a full-on conflict between two nuclear powers. Is this how close we are to the brink at all times?
It's terrifying. I mean, mistakes should be met with reflection about what caused the mistake, because mistakes can result in greater confrontation and war and nuclear attacks.
Yeah.
You know, we came this close. Everybody knows now that we came this close during the Cuban Missile Crisis to a full-on nuclear confrontation, and that cooler heads prevailed at like the very last minute. Mistakes happen in war all the time. They happen on all sides of every conflict, going back to the beginning of history. People kill people on their own side all the time.
Sure.
The U.S. has done that in Afghanistan and Iraq. We've killed our soldiers have mistakenly killed our own people. I'm sure the other sides have as well. This is the danger of war. Even war done for the best intention and for good reasons, there can be mistakes, which I'm not sure this is the case, but.
Yeah.
It's very scary, and the reality should be, how can we ramp down tensions rather than ramp them up? What can we do to contribute to talks, to a ceasefire? Now, and unfortunately, the Biden administration has rejected out of hand the idea of a ceasefire.
Yeah, I mean, there was this concern that, you know, a ceasefire entrenches the current Russian position, which means that Ukraine is basically ceding this territory and acknowledging a territorial defeat, at least. And, you know, we talked to a guest yesterday. People should listen and reflect on that if they want more details about what some foreign policy experts think is the likely outcome. But it does seem like the refusal to concede anything on the part of the West, because that looks like a Putin victory, is getting in the way of substantive negotiations here. It'll be really interesting to continue to watch the role that, you know, China plays in some of these negotiations, and whether cooler heads will ultimately prevail.
A ceasefire would save Ukrainian lives. That's what I don't understand. It would save Ukrainian lives. It would save Russian lives. It would again. And now, if they can't, and if at that point a diplomatic resolution cannot be achieved, there's always the sad and unfortunate option of going back to military conflict.
Yeah,
I don't understand why you wouldn't pause
That's a good point, because I do think that there is a presumption of permanence when you talk in the talk of a ceasefire. That isn't necessarily true, because I do think the counter argument is, you know, we can think of any number of other conflicts, or imagine a world where there was an invasion of U.S. territory, and we wouldn't be quite so glib, perhaps, about saying, well, you know, they got California, what are you going to do? Right. We got to save the Midwest, you know?
But the reality is they do have California. I mean, in this analogy, they do have that territory. They occupy it.
But that analogy also ignores this is a situation where America had been involved in a civil war for a number of years, where Californians really wanted to be a part of Canada, and there was some, you know, there was a democracy issue at stake as well. And do they have self-determination?
And if California was being invaded, how much military aid would we get from Europe? What would they be doing to help us? You know, we're the major funders of the defense of the Western world.
Right. Well, I mean, this is the argument that we talked about last week also, in that, I think, interview that Bill Clinton gave recently, where, just to moot this, give the counter argument, Bill Clinton's saying the only reason that Ukraine doesn't have the ability to defend itself right now is because we encouraged them, Clinton encouraged them, that administration encouraged them to denuclearize with the guarantee of U.S. protection. So there's, I think, a bigger question of why we keep putting ourselves in this position, and how it benefits us to be able to posture as the world's policeman because we've made these.
I guess if you want to say we're obligated to help Ukraine because of the terrible position we put them in, not just with the encouragement of denuclearization, but with the dangling NATO in front of them, thereby antagonizing Russia without actually bringing them into NATO. I mean, that I can understand the logic of that argument. I mean, a lot of mistakes were made along the road to where we are today.
Yeah, well, definitely an odd set of stories for the position of the American military.
By the way, that the young man who was interviewed by the Washington Post said he says he expects law enforcement to be in contact with him. I presume if the Washington Post has pieced this together, the FBI or whoever's investigating this has already pieced it together. It would be crazy if the Washington Post beat them to it. It'd be some real fine detective work there. But he has said, the young man said he will not cooperate and he won't give up OG's identity. So he would sooner go to prison than betray his best friend.
Okay, I hope his parents are involved in these negotiations. All right, coming up next, I will tell you what's on my radar. You won't want to miss it. Stick around.